Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Absolutely amazing week. We had a huge training here in the center in Medellin. Even though we do most of our training online, we brought the man, the myth, the legend, the trader I call Superman, 71 years old. Ironically enough, we also had a trader that was one of the youngest that has ever started with me. He started when he was 14, already trading live at 16 years old. Had a great training, 25, 30 people. Then we went to Cartagena. Obviously, Cartagena, Colombia is amazing. And now I just got back to some construction here at the beautiful hotel that I'm going to be building for you guys, Airbnb/hotel. So if you guys are going to come to Medellin, which I recommend in the next few years, don't forget to look up La Malia Oasis. And we're building a resort also in a beautiful, the most historic coffee farm in all of Colombia. That's going to be amazing as well, out in a town about an hour away. So look that up as well. It's called La Malia. Okay, so overall this week, the majority of the situation, or what affected the market, I should say, is obviously the concern about the economy and the trade war with the United States and China. We had a situation where we kept getting record highs throughout the week. Overall, all three indices in the United States received brand new record highs intraday, and also after it closed, the Dow hit 28,000 for the first time as well. And for the week, the Dow was up 1.17%. The Nasdaq was up 0.78%, and the S&P 500 0.87%. And you guys can see just kind of little rises. If you guys remember last year, I told you we're not going to get these huge runs anymore. You know, just kind of every week, just kind of going a little bit. Well, record high. Oh yeah, things are great. Record high. Oh yeah, things are great. But not as great as everybody says it is. We'll find out in the next few years. In overseas market news, Trump did threaten to substantially increase tariffs if China failed to agree to a trade deal. He also criticized the EU trade policies and is still deciding whether to raise tariffs on EU and Japanese automakers. Chilean, the main stock exchange, spiked over 8% on Friday, announcing a new constitution for next year. EU markets are mixed. The biggest loser was Spain at 1.44%. Because of the elections. I'll let you guys know about that in just a moment. Istanbul, more volatile emerging market, went up 2.16%. And in Latin American markets, the Argentine Merval, very volatile, went down by over 7%. And the index in Santiago went up by 3.62%. In Africa and Middle Eastern markets, Nigeria, the biggest winner, 2.04%. And the losers were between 1 to 1.74 as well. In Asia and Australia, Hong Kong, HSCEI, tongue twister, went down by 5.03%. And the Philippines, we got some traders out there. I always put this in the video as well. Went down by 1.68%. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news. Not a lot of news for the cryptos this week, other than the fact that Bitcoin went down by 6.52% at about $8,480.54. In financial and banking news, consumer prices in the United States spiked by more than 7 months in October after 3 cuts this year in the interest rates. That also put together with the abating fears of a recession. The Fed did state that they weren't going to drop rates in the near term. Health costs, however, did surge by the most in over 3 years, and recreation, going to movies, going to the beach, those kinds of things, posted its biggest gain since early 1996. U.S. Central Bank Chairman Powell warning that the Fed budget is on an unsustainable path with national debt over $23 trillion. It could make it really difficult for the U.S. economy to be able to recover future market downturns. And Chilean pesos at a historic low after protests are doing more damage to the economy. This is a little bit ironic for me. I know it doesn't affect you guys as much in the U.S. If you guys don't get out much in the U.S., because I know a lot of us don't, Chile is the only first world country in Latin America. It has been the most stable for years. And also, fun fact, they're the only Latin Americans that are allowed to come to the United States without a visa. So they can come with just their passport. So now this is kind of what bugs me. You know, there's a lot of people in Chile, and we have a lot of traders out there as well, that all they want to do is just live a good life, go to work, you know, do their thing. And now these protests are literally kind of spilling over into the economy. They're doing so much damage that it's literally hurting everyone, not just what they wanted to fix initially. So for me, obviously I'm an outsider looking in. I think in the United States as well, you know, there's things that we can fix, right? There's bad things and good things. But as I travel around the world and I see the way people live and I see the opportunities that people have, that's why, for example, I'm in Latin America, because the opportunities here, guys and girls, you really don't realize how good we have it in the U.S. And today I tried to give a job to a young woman that had to move from an apartment and literally live in a shack, where there's kind of these, you know, I'm sure you guys have seen them online. They're called favelas in Brazil, just shacks, and it's just like they don't have any running water. They have, it broke my heart. It's just literally just picture it like living under a bridge, but no bridge, just wood with no running water, where the water literally comes into your house. And someone like that could have help in the United States, whereas here there's just no help. Because, you know, she doesn't have a job. I offered to give her a job so she can get back on her feet. But, you know, it's a shame to see what's happening, because I understand we need to correct a few things, even in the U.S., but it's nowhere near as bad as other countries in the world. So that kind of broke my heart, just kind of tell a little story to you guys. In commodities, Aramco, which is the state-owned oil company of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they want to sell 0.5% of the shares are going to be allocated to individual investors, which they're hoping to be the biggest IPO in history. A few things that are still unknown: the total percentage of the company to be sold, price, shares, and the estimated total value of Aramco, which is the company name, which should be between $1.2 to $2.3 trillion. The International Energy Agency's annual World Energy Outlook is saying that the U.S. shale revolution is going to reshape global energy markets in years ahead. The increase in production up to 2030, 85% of it is going to be from the U.S. It's going to be at 19 barrels a day. 19 million barrels a day, and it's going to push down the global oil market held by OPEC and Russia to 47% by the mid-2000s. So the mid-2020s, that should be, excuse me. So that's from 55%. So that's great news for us, due to the fact that they won't be able to manipulate the price of oil as much. It'll be more on the market, which is the way it should be. Crude for the week: U.S. crude went up 0.84% to 57.72. The international Brent went up 1.50% to 63.45. Precious metals had their worst week in the last 2 years, reaching 3-month lows after, because of the quote-unquote good news, investors are obviously returning to the equities markets. Gold went up 1.24% to 1468, and silver went up 1.01% to 1704. In political news, Bolivia's president is out after 14 years of rule, creating a power vacuum that affected the country quite a bit. This is the last survivor of the wave of the leftist leaders in Latam. The only ones that are left are Venezuela, and I believe the ones in Argentina that actually just entered. Also, there was elections in Spain. Spain's center-right Ciudadanos quit on Monday after voters deserted them in droves. Socialists, after they won the biggest of all of them. If you guys don't know, in most other countries around the world, there's not just 2 parties as in the U.S. There's 4, 5, 6, 7 parties. So the center left won. They made an agreement with the far left, the extreme left, like Warren or Bernie Sanders, for example, in the United States, which is called the Unidas Podemos parties. They agreed to form a coalition government, but they don't have a majority, so they're really not going to be able to do anything significant. The socialists ruled out a grand coalitions with the Conservative People's Party, which finished second. This is the 4th election in Spain since 2015 and the 2nd since 2019. And again, since we're talking about left and right, I just want to remind you guys, doesn't matter what party you love, right, left, center. If you love Obama, hate Obama, love Trump, hate Trump, I'm always going to keep these videos non-political. I'm just going to report the facts more than anything so you guys can learn, okay? Protests paralyzed Lebanon as well after President Michael further enraged demonstrators. Get this is really funny. He urged them to end a revolt against corruption and cronyism in the political establishment. Great job. He's definitely on the ball with things. Support for President of Mexico AMLO fell 10% to about 58.7% after the recent surge in gang violence. They did a poll on Friday finding that out. And the U.S. ambassador voicing concerns due to parallel governments run by the drug cartels in various parts of the country instead of the government. In economic news, Europe's largest economy, Germany, barely avoided a recession in quarter 3, expanded by just 0.1%, following strong factory orders in September, but the outlook remains poor, as they might just postpone the recession rather than actually avoiding it altogether. And Chinese economy is already growing at its slowest pace since 1992. Corporate news, Alibaba absolutely smashed their sales records on Singles Day. It's kind of like our Black Friday that they made up. In 16 and a half hours, they had bigger sales than Black Friday and Cyber Monday combined. Imagine that. It's equal to about 87% of the online sales last quarter, the last 3 months of Amazon. The Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba also is going to list on Hong Kong to be able to try to raise $13.4 billion to be able to do their expansion plans. Walmart went up 3% to 125 to a new all-time high as the world's biggest retailer reported bigger than expected quarter 3 U.S. sales with higher spending at its stores and website. It picked up market shares in groceries and has posted a 21-quarter streak of U.S. growth, unmatched by any retail chain. Total revenue was up 2.5% to $128 billion, and the shares are up 30% in 2019. 50 U.S. state and territory attorney generals are investigating Google for antitrust violations. They're now deciding to expand the investigation into search and also their Android, the phone business, when before it was just going to be their ad business. 2 major sticking points in phase 1 of the U.S.-China trade deal. On trade news this week, there's a bit of I forgot how you say that in English. They're kind of like standing on opposite corners. The Chinese want the U.S. to revoke or throw back all the tariffs, and then the U.S. wants them, Chinese, to be able to spell out how they're going to do the $50 billion in purchases over the annual agreement that they're going to sign. So they're kind of at a stalemate, but we're moving forward, supposedly. U.S. Economic Advisor Kudlow said that the negotiations for Phase 1 trade deal are near an end as well, which is great news. In technology, German Chancellor Merkel was urging the EU to have digital sovereignty by developing its own platform instead of relying so much on U.S. companies for their cloud, like Google, Microsoft, and also Amazon. They have so many companies, this is quote, she said, so many companies have outsourced all their data to U.S. companies that it makes Europe dependent on them, which is not a good thing according to her. In investment news, Disney Plus, the Disney streaming platform, launched on the 12th of November in the United States, Canada, and the Netherlands. For CEO Bob Iger, it represents a major shift and focus for him. Disney is at the top of the media world after its record-breaking movies. Remember that Avengers, the last one that came out, I forgot the name, is now the best-selling movie of all time. And also they're doing very well with theme parks and TV networks and the Buzz Lightyear action figures. They've invested billions to be able to go ahead and create this new platform, and it is a risky gamble because there's not any profits in any streaming services yet. 10 million subscribers in the first day. They want to have 60 to 90 million globally by 2024. And just to put this into perspective, HBO took 10 years to get 10 million subscribers. Imagine that. Tesla says that Berlin, Germany is going to be the site of its second factory outside of US and China, named the Gigafactory 4. It's going to build batteries, powertrains, and vehicles starting with the Model Y. And it's also going to provide competition to Volkswagen, which is the biggest, at one point was the biggest producer of cars in the world after their diesel scandal. They dropped a bit, but they're still the biggest in all of Europe. Volkswagen, plan to invest $61.1 billion to electrify their entire product lineup over the next 4 years. U.S. Defense Secretary Esper rejects the notions of bias after the United States gave the $10 billion cloud contract to Microsoft instead of Amazon as part of a broader digitalization and modernization at the Pentagon. And the EU is set to cut $2.2 billion of yearly investments in funding oil, natural gas, and coal projects by the end of 2021. And it aims to be the first climate neutral continent. Gas projects are still going to be allowed, but they must use quote-unquote new technologies. I do believe that we have to take care of the environment. One of the things I find interesting, however, is if you guys really look at, there's some data, there was some scientists that posted a report in Norway that humans only affect the climate 0.5% or 0.05%. And there's also some interesting facts that the temperature actually changes with the sun, not necessarily with the carbon that we emit in the atmosphere. It's really interesting, for example, for me to think about, and whether you're for the climate or not, I think it's open for debate, these kinds of things, and I think it's interesting how we have been, the rising seas that we've had since the glacial period, right? We had a huge ice sheet, and all that ice was the water now that's in the oceans over, for example, the United States and Europe. And somehow or another, the Earth was warmed without carbon when we didn't have cars or anything, 1,000 years ago. So it's actually, to me, it's interesting to kind of put those two together. But I do still believe that we do need to do a better job of taking care of the environment. For example, plastic straws I don't think are necessary, right? I think we can use little paper straws to be able to drink with a cup out of, things like that. So I'll leave it up to you guys to decide. But this, I think, is a mistake because even though Europe is on one extreme when it comes to the climate crisis, other countries, for example, the United States, now China, Russia, India, places in Africa, they're not going to adhere by these policies. So the economy that's going to kill Europe, because they're not going to invest in these kind of projects anymore, and they're trying to curb also a lot of carbon fuels. India and China, which are some of the biggest economies in the world, aren't going to do these things anymore. So it's literally going to take business out of Europe and give it to these emerging economies. It's part of the reason, for example, that the EU is sinking economically. Not only that, right, bureaucracy and that as well. And other places like China, India, and everything else are coming up. In international events, Israel killed a top commander from the Iranian-backed Palestinian militia group Islamic Jihad on Tuesday at the Gaza Strip. It drew retaliatory rocket fire against Israel that reached as far as Tel Aviv, and the worst cross-border fighting in months. And Israel military also counterattacked by taking out the Gaza rocket launchers. In an unusual fact this week, Venice in Italy hit by the worst flood since 1966. 85% of the city was flooded. This is the sixth time in just 1,200 years that has happened. It went up by about 70, close to 74 inches, about 187 centimeters for you guys on the other system that the rest of the world uses. I believe it's called the imperial system. Correct me if I'm wrong here in the comments. It hit again on Friday, leaving 70% of the city inundated, with damage caused about $1.1 billion. Google will soon offer checking accounts to customers and expecting to launch in 2020. They're making agreements with Citigroup and also a small credit union at Stanford University. Facebook has already shut down 5.4 billion fake accounts on the main platform this year, compared to just 3.3 billion fake accounts removed in 2018. It shows the highlights of the challenges it's facing Facebook for the high-stakes U.S. election in 2020. Americans now are buying more diamond jewelry than ever as the diamonds get steadily cheaper. Lower prices and a global glut in the cheap type stones that go into the discount stone engagement ring for a pair of earrings or the rings. It's a more discounted diamond, so it's flooding the market and affecting quite a bit the prices. There's also a company called Petra Diamonds that sold a 20-carat blue gem for nearly $15 million. It's a major boost for the firm that's drowning in debt and also affected by the lower prices for the diamonds. And the diamond was found in September in its Cullinan mine in South Africa, which is famous for producing very exotic and expensive diamonds, which are the blue hue diamonds, which are, a lot of them are found in the British Crown Jewels. It sold the diamond for $741,000 a carat. Imagine if we fed people with that money instead of going to wear jewelry. These people. Other than that, the largest ever Starbucks is opening its doors in Chicago. It's the 6th Reserve Roaster globally. 35,000 square feet, loaded on 5 floors, 3 coffee bars, a cocktail bar, an artisan bakery, and a cafe. Starbucks says that the average roastery people spend 3 to 4 times more money than a typical Starbucks cafe, and they say that on average they're going to see over 8,000 visitors a day. And heavy snow and rain during the harvest in Canadian Canada. The Canadian prairies left millions of acres of canola buried until the spring. It's the most profitable crop that they have in Canada, and it's going to cause a lot of problems for farmers in 2020 since we've had problems with the corn in the US, problems in India as well. And that normally is exported to China, Japan, Mexico to make vegetable oil and animal feed. That's the news for this week, guys. Don't forget to subscribe here to the channel. All the questions with hashtag AskMarcelo. I'm going to start doing some more videos for you guys, and we'll see you next week.